And in other news, Paragon City was rocked recently by the release of another update in the form of what the Homecoming dev team are calling Issue 28, Page 2, Legacy. For those unfamiliar, Paragon City is the central location of City of Heroes, the 2004 MMORPG from Cryptic Studios that was shuttered in November 2012. The MMO existed under a secret identity for 6 years, whereupon source code was distributed widely and negotiations began with the owners of the game's rights to keep the game's free servers live. It is an example of a game that provably could be maintained after its end of life, through mostly the removal of things like payment processing. Maintained now by fans, City of Heroes splintered out into dozens of smaller specific servers, and the one I play, where I hang my cape, is City of Heroes Homecoming. And we just got a new patch! City of Heroes is a game with an alt-heavy culture, where characters are easy to make and customize, where you get to roleplay them in a space running around doing things with your friends to tell a story of the character you made. Any new release can be seen in terms of things to do and things to make, and Legacy gives us a bunch of both. First of all, let's talk about the new stuff to do. When Homecoming launched, we had a whole new zone rolled out called Kallisti Wharf, which was an interesting novelty, but ultimately a photo booth of a place. I can't tell you where Kallisti Wharf came from, but my assumption has been that it was high-level cooperative zone that the original NCSoft team were going to release at some point, and just left in the code as of 2012. Kallisti Wharf had some standard player tools and even a single exploration badge, but nothing spawned there. No mobs, no enemies, no events, no nothing. It's like how people remember Brickstown. Trust me, that's funny if you ever played on live. In this patch, we get Kallisti Wharf's population. The zone now has random enemy spawns from the Freeclock, Cray, Freakshow Skulls, Awakened, Wyvern, the United People's Army, and Malta factions, as well as a new faction designed just for the Wharf called Blackwing Industries. More on them later. There are 2 repeatable contacts in the zone, a Blackwing Industries representative, and Chip, a disgraced former cop, and 5 conventional plot arc contacts in the forms of Dap Dap the Dealmaker? Sorry. Aaron West, Robert Kogan, Alexander the Great, and Adelard Ziegler. These characters give you plots that take you around Kallisti and show something of what the factions are doing here. These plots are, well, they're plot arcs written by fans with up to 20 years of material to back reference. They use a lot of up-to-date mission technology like NBC chatter and design, and I think they're quite good. Blackwing Industries, the new faction, represent a truly inspired piece of faction design for a game like this at this stage in its life. The first thing that they're just designed to accommodate how players play at very high levels and resist that. If you jump into a spawn and judgment it, a judgment is a big, high-damage blast available to level 50 characters who've done a lot of endgame stuff, they will kick your teeth in, because Blackwing unlocks special abilities when they've lost most but not all of their health. They're really good at entrenching where they are, and the way to fight them best, and therefore fastest, is to keep them moving away from their spawn point. Let them drop their buff turrets and machines, then move. I love this as a way to mix up the late game's nuke fest. And that's not a criticism of the endgame. I love the nuke fest too. Anyway, Blackwing aren't just mechanically novel, they're also the worst. They're a private military contractor being brought on board to privatize and police Kallisti Wharf. They're a militarized police as a corporate service, and they're designed to resist standard player tactics. I love them. I can't stand fighting them. Gotta get my feet under me as far as fighting them on a Dominator. Anyway, Kallisti Wharf also now has its own giant monster event, which players can trigger by beating up random spawns of Blackwing around the zone. It's a giant monster, it's a big thing for you and your friends to throw attacks at. As with all giant monsters in City of Heroes, it's a combat piñata. Bring your pals, you'll have some fun. As for stuff to make, the 2 most notable additions to Homecoming this patch are psionic armor for tankers, stalkers, brutes, and scrappers, and pyrotechnic control for controllers and dominators. Energy aura and regeneration have both been proliferated to tankers, along with a modest rebalance, and staff melee, dark armor, and sonic attack all got a little goosing that should make things better for most use cases. More on that later. Psionic armor is a set I would normally compare to dark armor, in that it does a bunch of things, and it has an exotic specialization. Where some sets give you exactly one thing and a lot of it, like, say, super reflexes, psionic armor gives you 2 resistance toggles, a defense toggle, a mez aura, an active absorb shield, and 2 enemy-affecting debuff powers. I may stand tall as one of Dark Armor's greatest fans for all of its mixed-up strangeness, so I know that's going to color how I feel about psionic armor, but I do love this set a lot. It's a mix of interesting pieces that let you do the job of surviving, but each of its strange pieces has applications in different kinds of situations. For example, if you're dealing with enemies with lots of to hit, you know they're not going to care about your defense anymore, and it's time to lean heavily on your absorb barrier instead. If you're dealing with enemies that have nasty debuff effects, you want to use your area terror instead of saving it as a self-res. It also looks really swooshy and pink. I love it. Its greatest sin, unfortunately, is that it has an obvious partner set in Psychic Melee, which I just don't like very much. I'm not a hater, I'm just not compelled to try it. Then we have Pyrotechnic Control, i.e. the Jubilee set. My experience with Pyrotechnic Control is very much biased towards the Dominator side of things, because I am somehow enraptured with the worst archetype in the game. The changes to controllers, more on that later, might make it play very differently, but the way I describe Pyrotechnic is a chaotic comparison to Earth Control, where Earth Control has a bit of everything and therefore wants to pretty much whatever 3 controls you want the most often, and it's usually stalagmites, volcanic gases, and stone cages. Pyrotechnic has a bunch of effects that are good, but unpredictable. It has a toggle aura that encourages you to mix it up, and that aura can knock people down. Well, up, actually, which is even better in terms of depriving enemy of actions, but also sounds worse. And none of its powers are the same shape. So you have a targeted AoE, a cone, a player-based AoE, that kind of thing. On the one hand, that means lots of responsive choices to make. On the other hand, it suggests you kind of want to take every power and you may just make the wrong choice at some point and get pancaked. I like it a lot, but you should think of it as choosing chaos, and there are definitely going to be people who are oversensitive to knockback, who see enemies flopping around and think that you're being irresponsible with your powers. My advice? Ignore those people. But not only all that, but also, here's a list of things that also happened in this patch that may change things for you, or give you new ideas for what you can do with your characters. First of all, Tank has got a modest rebalance. Given the buffs they had last time, this seems pretty reasonable to me. They're kind of out of bounds. It's okay to pull them back and make it so people have a reason to bring brutes to things. Basically, their AoEs got a little less ridiculous than they were last time. Sleep has been changed into 2 different statuses. Sleep as it used to work, and Deep Sleep, which is stackable and not broken by damage the same way. Damage shortens the remaining duration on a Deep Sleep, but it doesn't instantly break it. This is mostly used to buff some sleep powers that needed help because nobody took them, or that don't work well with the modern playstyle. Mind Control's Mesmerize, which is an all-star pinch power, is now much more spammable because its damage doesn't end its effect immediately anymore. And I mean, like, Mesmerize is just a great power. You should definitely be picking that up and treating it like it's a blast attack. Anyway, controllers can now control pets directly, like how Masterminds do. This gives a controller more direct control over the threats that they're engaging. How many times have I said control already? I can't speak of how good a change this is, but it hardly seems bad to me, since plenty of times I have seen my imps getting a fight started that I did not want started. Sonic Attack's debuffs now work way more simply, and you don't need to worry about weaving them together properly. If you weren't a really hardcore optimizer pushing the recharge limits on your powers, you should get a slightly better negative resistance effect than before. Just attack all the time. Staff Melee got given a modest goose. You still get your stacking buff from Perfection when you miss, and the bonus damage it grants both Sky Splitter and Eye of the Storm has been doubled. As one of the 3 remaining Staff Melee players, I welcome this change that was clearly done just for little old me. Dark Armor has been given a little fork. If you don't like Dark Regeneration, you can instead take the power Obscure Sustenance. Obscure Sustenance is a much more conventional self-heal in the vein of Healing Flames, and it doesn't damage enemies or scale based on how many enemies you hit, and it also costs only 10 endurance of your 100 starting base, instead of Dark Regeneration's whopping 33. In this commenter's opinion, if you don't like Dark Regeneration as it is, then you are weak and will not survive the winter, but more options for lesser players is always good. Hey, are you one of the diehards who want a regeneration buffed since 2008 or so? Well, good news, it turns out 16 years is just long enough to finally get your set a little bit of fussing. I don't really know what the changes are doing, because all my regeneration characters worked fine, seemingly, but hey, maybe this change gives us another opportunity to finally nerf regen again. There's a system for things called adaptive recharge that's been rolled out to a lot of control powers, meaning that some powers like Flash and Cinders are now much more useful in the leveling process, because normally they had a really long recharge, like 4 minutes, and it didn't matter how many people you hit. Now, if you hit one person with flash or cinders, it recharges in something like 16 seconds, making it a much more reliable soloing tool and more useful for small teams. It'll only take those big 4 minutes if you've locked down a big group. Finally, and probably the most important change of the whole patch, if you're into broadsword, you can now wield a fish. See? Get a load of that. Fish sword. Look, this is a video explaining cool things you can make and play in a 20-year-old MMORPG that's still getting fan-made patches and still playable now. You can beef about how it happened all you like, and I expect you to, because if Regeneration has told me anything about this game, it's that City of Heroes fans are capable of holding a grudge forever. But we get to play City of Heroes again because someone out there made a choice to refuse to let the game die. We only have Homecoming because someone refused to let the game be killed. And I love it. If you like the idea of games that can persist beyond their end of life, that maybe if nobody cares about it, you should be allowed to make something out of it, then may I recommend you, if you're an EU citizen, go check out the Stop Killing Games petition in the description. It costs you nothing, and you'd have to be a real twerp to imagine that actually, it's much better to have corporations having a lot of power over the unused commons. I've been Talon Lee. Good night.